So, for the past few years, underground music has been experiencing an explosion of shoegaze, a genre born from the 1980s underground, often citing the ethereal sounds of the Cocteau Twins and the noisy, fuzzed-out guitar of Dinosaur Jr. and the Jesus and Mary Chain as key influences. So how did shoegaze, a genre traditionally defined by its dreamy guitar textures and shy vocals, merge with nu metal, an aggressive blend of metal and hip-hop that did it all for the nookie? I'm not sure, but let's find out. The original run of shoegaze was short-lived, lasting from roughly 1988 to 1993. This classic period is best defined by two albums: My Bloody Valentine's Loveless and Slowdive's Souvlaki. As grunge and Britpop dominated the youth culture of the early to mid-90s, shoegaze was largely forgotten. As the decade came to a close, a more aggressive genre would have the angsty youth of the day trading in their cardigans for Jinkos and Adidas. Beginning with Korn's self-titled 1994 album, nu metal mixed drop-tune guitar riffs, syncopated hip-hop grooves, and funky fresh rap vocals. A mix no surge chugging, angsty teen of the 1990s could ignore. While much of nu metal can be characterized by the alpha male party vibe of Limp Bizkit's multi-platinum Significant Other, the genre did include a more sensitive, dreamy side, which kind of brings this whole thing together. While never shying away from down-tuned guitar riffs heavy enough to incite a high school riot, the Deftones leaned heavily into their softer, more otherworldly and introspective side. 1997's Around the Fur and 2000's White Pony became instant landmark albums of the genre, proving that even your high school bully had a void that only a gaze of beautiful, otherworldly instrumentation and Chino's sensual vocals could fill. Throughout the 2000s, nu metal became more and more lame, eventually losing its edge. But fortunately, by the early 2010s, an unexpected revival was forming in the underground. Thanks to indie tastemakers like Pitchfork and Tumblr singing the praises of My Bloody Valentine and Slowdive, shoegaze began to slowly regain interest. Throughout the 2000s, bands like The Pains of Being Pure at Heart and Beach House modernized the shoegaze sound, blending a unique mix of dream pop and indie that would spend the next decade as the soundtrack to your local Urban Outfitters. By the early 2010s, a new, more aggressive generation of shoegaze bands, born from the world of punk and hardcore, began to gain traction. Led by bands like Nothing and Whir, shoegaze, which had always been heavy in an emotional sense, was now more intense than ever, often citing the Deftones as a key influence. In its most extreme turn yet, blackgaze bands like Deafheaven and Alcest introduced the atmospheric assault of Norwegian black metal to the genre, a mix so impossible that it somehow led to one of the most critically acclaimed records of the decade. Well, that brings us to today, the 2020s. Shoegaze is more popular than ever, with no sign of slowing down. While their place in the shoegaze canon is widely debated, bands like Fleshwater, Trauma Ray, and Loathe are leading the genre with their unique blend of drop-tuned, nu metal-inspired riffs, dreamy atmospheres, and whispered vocals. Meanwhile, classic shoegaze bands like Slowdive are reunited and headlining the world's largest music festivals alongside nu metal titans like Slipknot. So how do I explain all this? In recent years, Instagram and TikTok have memified both shoegaze and nu metal, somehow blurring the lines and creating a hazy nostalgia for the two genres. Streaming platforms like Spotify and YouTube have made each of these genres, especially shoegaze, more accessible than ever. I also think people are simply more open-minded these days. The 90s were a time of extreme gatekeeping, when selling out was literally the worst thing you could do.
Nirvana smells like Teen Spirit off of Nevermind.
Oh no, Rob, that's not obvious enough.
Hard to believe, but this was a time when listening to a band like System of a Down would have you instantly banished from your punk or indie scene. But as you might have guessed, the Deftones were always the one band that united all subcultures. These days, a whole new generation of kids are discovering shoegaze for the first time. Born to millennial and Generation X parents, Gen Z probably grew up with the Deftones playing in the car, shaping their musical sensibilities. The current generation of shoegaze is a melting pot of what came before, offering the escapism of My Bloody Valentine with some of the aggression of nu metal. And who couldn't use a little aggressive escapism from life these days?